Hello. So we haven't done a video for some time. I haven't done a podcast for some time, actually. I think we're moving towards a stage where I'm going to put out podcasts and videos when there's an opportunity to do so. I'm involved in some other things at the moment, so it's more difficult to put out material on a regular basis. But if you're interested in coming on the podcast, just get in touch with me. But anyway, I wanted to make this video to talk about a few things. Well, a couple of things. One is this debate this ongoing debate really about ECT, electroconvulsive therapy, and whether it's effective or not. And there's research coming out saying that actually it's not effective, and then there's the other side that says, well, it actually really is. It's just that it's, evidence is whatever. I don't know. I don't even know. Ignored, or we're not considering people that are helped from it, or blah blah blah. So the issue is what is effective, in my opinion. That is the central element, because there's no point talking about effectiveness without discussing what effectiveness is. So, of course, if you're in an abusive relationship and you take ECT to feel better, and then the abuse becomes more tolerable and you stay in that abusive relationship, that's not a very good outcome, in my opinion, even though it might be effective even if ECT makes you feel better. So this is regardless of whether it's the effect of a placebo or not. Now, people on the other side would say, okay, but then you feel better if you have more energy to escape the abuse. I mean, I find it more likely that the person will just find that the abuse is more tolerable. But because most of us, when we only really consider making big changes to our life if our life is really not going in the right direction. If more or less we're coping, we don't make huge changes to our life. So this then boils down to another issue, which is the second issue that I wanted to talk about. So when you say, well, I don't think that's the way to go, they'll tell you, well, what is the alternative in cases that are very severe, of catatonia or whatever? And again, the premise of the question is what matters, in my opinion. So the premise of the question is whether the environment that we build has any effect in bringing about this situation and in making this situation more or less difficult for the person. And so a biopsychosocial approach, which they keep saying, even traditionalists, that we have a biopsychosocial approach already. A biopsychosocial approach means that, from what I understand, that your experience is a product of your biochemistry, the environment, and your personal history. So biochemical, social, and psychological aspects come together in some way and form your presentation. So we can't say that whatever, if you're kidnapped by a terrorist group that's playing a sadistic torture game on the catatonic, that's going to be make the person feel exactly the same as if you're taking care of them in an open environment that is welcoming. I really struggle to see things this way, as other people see it. The biopsychosocial approach means that the environment has an impact. And so there's no point saying there's no alternative to ECT, because then even people in favor of ECT say, well, yes, we need to understand better the damage that it does to people that get hurt by it. But there's no alternative. I mean, there's no point saying there's no alternative if we're not working on the system to change it, to make it more open. And so this is probably the main reason why I'm doing this video. I have this golden cage that I built for myself, and I apologize for it. That every time we start with this conversation, people say, well, it's impossible to have an environment that's going to change the way people present and make it easier. And then I said, well, okay, what about the Trieste model? And then, people say, oh, that can't exist, so it's basically a psychotic position or something that exists. They say it doesn't exist and can't take care of people with severe mental illness, because an open door place can't do it, but it does, right? So what the problem is, I would like to actually talk about the principles behind this idea. So how making an environment more open, you make it easier to relate to people, and how this is based on subjectivity. So I can tell you, I'm going to do A, B, and C to a catatonic person to make them feel better. Because the problem is that would be an institutional answer. That would be a one-size-fits-all answer that detaches the issue from my subjectivity, my humanity, and the humanity and subjectivity of the person. It just makes it a ritualistic exercise. So that's what this system wants. They say, yeah, but give me this ritual that's going to save people, and that doesn't exist. We want a project that is subjective. But when I start expressing this, they say that it's impossible. So I kind of feel cornered and kind of think, well, it is possible because I've been trained in a system like this. It exists. It's called Trieste, blah, blah, blah. But this makes it very difficult for me to actually explain the principles behind Trieste. And these people are not very smart because in the way they present, not because they're not smart, but because their arguments are not very smart. If they actually tried to understand what Trieste is about, they would understand that there are indeed some problems in Trieste, but not the open doors. There's other problems, right? So the idea, the fundamental idea to me is the principles behind how, changing the system in Britain, not in another part of the world. In Britain, we can build relations on trust, not suspicion, and all the things that I always say. That's what I would like to talk about. So I would need, if anybody has any suggestion about how I avoid mentioning the Trieste model, how can I just talk about the principles behind what I want to do when people tell me that's impossible? When people tell me, which by the way, the open door asylum was a British idea before Basaglia. Basaglia went further, obviously in Trieste, in Italy, in other places as well. But this fundamentally, the idea of the open doors are safer than locked doors were a British idea. Like British psychiatry is disavowing its best discoveries, that the things that should make them proud, they should be proclaiming this to the world. We found out that a logic of inclusion, of listening to people, of opening up is safer than locking down. But no, this is all forgotten. This is all nonsense. So how do I move away from talking about Trieste? How do I actually talk about the needs of the people in the UK based on principles that move us away from the hospital and into the community? I don't know. So, if anybody has any suggestion, let me know. Thank you. Bye-bye.